Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. I'm Rishabh Gulati. I'm going to take this opportunity and the platform that I have available with me, broadcasting in this country and internationally, to now raise a subject which requires to be raised. There are two premises and points of inflection predicated by the complete vacuum of information, and the information that is there is just downright, there's certain terminology I can't use on television, but downright cattle excrement. 4 days ago, the Central Tibetan Administration, operating out of Lhasa, operating out of Dharamsala, published a report. And if you know somebody who works for the CTA or publishes their newspapers and think that nobody reads them, I read them. Okay? The report stated, and I'm quoting, the Tibetan capital city of Lhasa has a new Chinese mayor. On December 13, 2022, Wang Qiang has replaced Go Khog, the Tibetan mayor of Lhasa, since 2016. The change of leadership comes in the wake of the recent COVID-19 crisis in Lhasa, with similar changes seen in Shigatse, Chamdo and other cities in Tibet hit hard by COVID. The second premise, that during a virulent pandemic, which is the one place you would not want to be, and the name itself, concentration camp, and guess who in their millions are in concentration camps right now? Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. Now, while we are talking about Wuhan and Beijing and Shanghai, I'm going to put a premise out there that there is an ever-present risk that the Chinese under Xi Jinping, notorious predators that they are, will seek opportunity even in the most ghastly crisis. And there is a huge risk that by the tens of thousands, Tibetans and Muslim Uyghurs will simply disappear by the time this wave is over. And this will be used as a pretext. Even in a free country like India, democracy, you will have heard reports that suddenly the Shastri Bhavan has a mysterious fire, that Mantralaya in Mumbai has a mysterious fire. Ladies and gentlemen, these mysterious fires never seem to hurt anyone, but a lot of files get lost. There is more than a mysterious fire raging through China right now, and a lot of lives are about to get lost. And it could be a large risk that those who are being oppressed will be killed off in their large numbers, either because of inadequacy to protections given to them, or even through deliberate means. Who knows what could be happening? Let me open up this conversation. Joining us on the broadcast, Ambassador Deepak Vora is still with us, Ambassador Suresh Goyal joining us on the broadcast, Vijay Kranti joining us on the broadcast, and Professor Nalapad stays with us. Ambassador Goyal, we're talking about Beijing, we're talking about Shanghai, the biggest cities on the eastern seaboard of the original 13 provinces of China proper. What about their occupied areas? What do we know about them?
Is there a question to me
Yes,
now?
yes, Ambassador Goyal, yes.
All right. I'm not talking about Shanghai, and frankly, I'm not aware of the occupied areas in Shanghai and the other places you mentioned. But there have been a lot of reports, and there have been a lot of, the comments and the opinion about Tibet being an occupied territory, Xinjiang, Urumqi, etc. China did occupy Xinjiang in 1950s, early 50s, when they were having an expansionist policy, occupied the areas which they were considered to be part of China's since early days. So going by the most liberal kind of an idea about what is an occupied territory by China, then you can count Xinjiang, Tibet, etc., 2 or 3 territories which we say that all right could be occupied by China. In Xinjiang, we have already mentioned about the concentration camps. There are also news confirmed by people from Tibet that even in Tibet, in view of the opposition rising in the past against China, that there are concentration camps even in Tibet where Tibetans have been kept. So yes, in that sense, there are occupied areas. There are these areas where China is using all its might to suppress the people, their freedom.
Okay, so Ambassador Goyal, I'm going to ask you the blunt question. For the notorious Chinese Communist Party, who will spot opportunity in the gravest of crisis, is there an ever-present theoretical risk at least that this pandemic will be utilized in Tibet and Xinjiang to eliminate tens of thousands of Uyghur Muslims and Tibetans? Is there a real risk that this could happen?
I think the question is really hypothetical, you said, and I think the real question is not really whether the pandemic will be used. I think the pandemic now has gone beyond Chinese control to be used as a weapon anywhere at all, because pandemic in China has now become the kind of wildfire which is going to consume lots and lots of people in Shanghai, in many areas of China, in Beijing, and it is spreading very fast, basically because of.
Okay, now for people watching the broadcast who already know this, as of yesterday, there were only 3,928 reported cases of COVID in China with 0 deaths. Now, you can choose to believe that or not. There is absolutely no figure reported from Xinjiang, no figures being reported from Tibet. The ground reports do not exist. We do not know what's happening there. And I can promise you that the medical facilities in Lhasa aren't as good as those in Beijing. Ambassador Vora, the last place you want to be during a COVID pandemic is in a concentration camp. Yet we know that at least 1 million Uyghur Muslims are currently in concentration camps. You can call them slave labor camps, whatever you want to call them. How many of them will die, and how many of those deaths will actually ever be recorded?
Mr. Gulati, always a pleasure to be with you, to learn from you, from Ambassador Goyal, Mr. Kanti, and Professor Nalap. But you said it all. You put it across brilliantly. The French writer Alphonse Card had said, plus ça change, plus c'est le même. The more it changes, the more it is the same. So give me a moment. Have you heard of the Herero? I'm sure you have, and Namaka genocide in what was Southwest Africa, now Namibia?
Yes.
First genocide of the 20th century. Characterized by widespread deaths from starvation, dehydration. Once defeated, the Hereros and Namas were imprisoned, and I'm now reading this very slowly, imprisoned in concentration camps, where the majority died of diseases, abuse, exhaustion, and no medical facilities. One missionary wrote, the Germans are filled with fearful hate. I must call it a bloodthirst against the Hereros. One hears nothing but talk of cleaning up, executing, shooting down to the last man. Sir, Tibet and Xinjiang are the latest examples of collateral damage in unrestrained geopolitical ambition. The people in these camps, you know this better than I do, as the virus rages across China, these fellows are being denied basic medical facilities. The poor people of Xinjiang and Tibet, for the Han Chinese, with their arrogant sense of superiority, are less than human. And sir, let me put it to you very bluntly, since the PLA could not annihilate the Tibetans and Uyghurs, Ping Pong hopes that his virus will do the job. When the right action is not taken at the right time, then it is time itself that causes the action to fail. Chanakya said 2,400 years ago, an appeal to the world to clobber this dingling fellow so hard that we prevent the extermination.
So let me build upon what you have said to build a question for Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, if the situation in the Chinese capital of Beijing is so dire that the medicines have run out, and the accountability and reporting from Beijing is so limited, in Lhasa it is zero. The best that we have is that Lhasa is infamous for being a forbidden city. Today it is forbidden. It is sealed off. There are suicides from within being reported. Protesters who are protesting against the administration. We can only confirm that the mayor has been replaced in the past few days. We don't know what's going on. We will perhaps never know what is going on and how many Buddhists will die, how many Tibetans will die, or how many of those deaths will ever be recorded, and how this will change the population dynamics of an occupied territory.
Rishabh, let me point out a very, very important situation. And Vijay Kranti, who has studied this expertly, will confirm this. You know, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The fact is that even today, despite the fact that he had to come to India for his own protection in 1959, in every Tibetan heart, the Dalai Lama's visage is there, strong and true. And this is something that is really, not been, the Chinese Communist Party simply cannot understand this. That party is rooted in atheism. They do not believe in anything that is spiritual. They do not believe in temples. They do not believe in Christianity or Islam or Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever. And they can't understand how a spiritual leader can command this kind of respect. Now, nobody lives eternally. And a situation may come, hopefully, many decades later, in which His Holiness the Dalai Lama is no longer with us. In that situation, the Chinese Communist Party leadership is very clear that the individual, the young little child chosen as the next Dalai Lama will either be completely Han, in the sense ethnically Han, or possibly half Han. You have a lot of Tibetan intermarriages. Tibetans are being encouraged and Han are being encouraged in Tibet to marry each other. Or you may have a Tibetan who is completely Sinicized.
So Professor Nalapad, sorry to interject. If this was the situation in the best of times,
yes,
currently amid the worst of times, with no idea what is going on and no way to report it, should we be afraid for the lives and health of Buddhist Tibetans right now?
There is no question of that, Rishabh. And may I point out that you remember when the settlers came from from England to settle down in America, they distributed blankets to the American Indians that were the blankets used by smallpox victims who had died. Those victims' blankets were given to the American Indians who died in their millions. Many more American Indians were killed by the diseases brought from outside and than through bullets. And that same thing happened to the Spanish. They also brought in certain European diseases and completely destroyed the Indians. Now the problem is concentration camps are absolutely the last thing that you need in a virus epidemic. It concentrates the virus and health conditions will be dire. Medical conditions, I'm sure, are dire. And as a consequence, yes, you are going to see a much higher fatality rate. Already, Tibet is no longer majority Tibetan. Tibet is today a majority Han province. And the next 20 years, the Han will account for 2/3 of the population of Tibet.
Okay, so Vijay Kranti, so here's the premise. There is a crisis, an economic crisis and a life crisis in all of China, including China proper and its occupied territories. They can't handle it in Beijing. They can't handle it in Shanghai. All the resources and priorities will be in China proper. There is racism practiced against the Helot classes of these occupied territories, including the Uyghur Muslims and the Tibetan Buddhists, who are considered a subservient class. And there might be certain Chinese officials who might feel that forget prioritization of their life and safety, that it is an opportunity to let them die, just like Churchill let the Bengalis die during the World War. How do we now fear and therefore put focus on what is going on during this pandemic over the next few weeks in Xinjiang and in Tibet? Dr. Kranti.
This is very unfortunate. Today, when the world has suddenly started talking about Tibet and Xinjiang, which is East Turkestan, the world has been only focused on mainland China so far. And there was, with the best of efforts of the media, whatever Western media is there or Indian media is there, we didn't have much of the real news. None of them reported what was going on in Wuhan, what the impact was after the virus spread. And later on also, we have been getting very little news. But unfortunately, the things were totally worse for Tibet, for East Turkestan, which China calls Xinjiang, and Southern Mongolia, which Chinese call Inner Mongolia. These are three colonies who have been totally kept under a blanket. It was iron blanket for last 70 years. And there was no news about, even in best of things.
So here's the news, Dr. Kranti, just bear with me. 1 month ago, we got news of a protest in Urumqi
Yes.
that took place because of a Chinese mandated zero COVID policy lockdown, where they locked the residents into an apartment building which caught fire, and these people were burnt alive. 10 of them in a single building. That's the last news that came out of Urumqi. We have nothing else after that. I've scoured for hours trying to get any details from Urumqi after that, and there is nothing to report.
You know, this is the tragedy of the rest of world, especially the Western world. We all have given all the freedom to the Chinese media to roam around in India, in America, in England, in France, wherever they are. They have freedom to go anywhere and report anywhere, hire local reporters, whereas the Chinese have given no permission, no freedom to the journalists. The result is that even in the best of days, there was no news about Tibet, no news about Xinjiang.
There is no news today, sir. We do not know what's happening in Lhasa.
There was one news before what happened in Urumqi. Even before that, there was a huge demonstration in Tibet. And interestingly, it was the Tibetans, the number was very small there. It was the Han Chinese settlers who have settled there, who were sick of these the lockdown, and who had protested in a very big number in Lhasa. And at that time, a little news came out because of the Chinese media which reported it. So, yes, I agree with you. There is no information about these two areas. But one thing is there. The presence of medical facilities is very, very, I would say, small as compared to cities like Beijing or Shanghai or other places.
Okay, so Dr. Vijay Kranti, should in our humanitarianness, should we offer medical supplies, vaccines to be sent to Xinjiang and to Tibet for the minorities of China, the Muslim minorities and the Buddhist minorities of China?
If China accepts even...
whether they accept it or not, that's their problem. Should we offer?
No, we should offer. The word should have offered by now. And even to the Chinese, the word should have offered. But unfortunately, the king is naked. He doesn't want... he doesn't believe that he's naked.
No, that's for him to read the children's book, sir. Ambassador Vora, there is zero. I've tried everything. There is no information on the situation in Lhasa anywhere. There is no reportage of anything of what is happening in places like Urumqi and other cities and towns in Xinjiang. Zero. It's a big fat zero. Should we be deeply concerned and therefore be offering help?
We've done what we could. Urumqi was very unfortunate what happened there. People died even during the COVID thing when there was a fire because they were not allowed to get out of their homes. We have done what we could. We are sheltering His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Lots of his people are here. They have their own system functioning here. Now the world has to come together. But as you rightly said at the beginning, the world is pretty useless when it comes to calling out dictators. Should we be helping them? Of course, we should come out. I believe this firmly with a statement saying that we are ready to help if they want our help. That, I think, will be a very powerful statement coming from a country that is a bridge between the developing and the developed world, sir.
Okay. Let me get Professor Nalapat into this. Professor Nalapat, in the absence not of sparse information, in the absence of no information, zero, absolutely nothing, should we have real concern for the Muslim Uyghurs and Buddhist Tibetans living in these parts of communist-controlled China?
Rishabh, Tibetan Buddhism is a wondrous philosophy. It's a complete philosophy of life. And I remember, in the 1970s and if you go back to that period, Tibetan Buddhism had charmed the world. In the same way, the Islam of the Uyghurs had always been very syncretic. Only a handful have been corrupted by this Wahhabi influence into becoming extremist. Although now almost the entire population is labeled as extremist simply for being Uyghur and simply for believing in Islam. So the fact is, yes, these are precious cultural treasures, but how strong the world is going to be, I don't know. If you look at the world, there is not a whimper of protest, actual substantive protest against what is happening in Xinjiang, Tibet, Inner Mongolia, Manchuria, and so many other places. In contrast, European politicians and American politicians, Canadians, they're making a beeline to Beijing, a beeline to China, and basically even doing the ridiculous, asking Xi Jinping to end the war in Ukraine, of which he is the major beneficiary.
Ambassador Goyal, on December 21st, which is just a few days ago, Radio Free Asia operating reported that an Uyghur named Behtiar Sadir has gone missing after he reported on Chinese social media WeChat the COVID crisis in his area. Gone missing, we all know where he is, if he's still alive. This is the last we've heard, and it's not happy news.
Absolutely. Rishabh, I'm going to talk from the practical point of view as to what should be done and how the situation should be dealt with. First of all, Chinese claims to Xinjiang are highly suspect. They have claimed Xinjiang's ownership as being part of China on very dubious grounds, quoting history time and again, which cannot be checked or which cannot be verified. I think it is time the Chinese claims on Xinjiang and Tibet are questioned internationally. That is number one. Please remember that India cannot do it all by itself. USA is supporting Tibetan, being part of China, Xinjiang, they're not speaking. The countries need to speak up, and I think the forum there is United Nations. It may not work out immediately, but I think a movement needs to be created about Xinjiang at least and Tibet, number one. Number two, anything that has to be done in Xinjiang, and I have no doubt that the people have vanished in the concentration camps, this should be raised also at the same time, separately, but same time in the Human Rights Commission about what is happening in Xinjiang, and I really don't see any harm by it.
Okay, so I have, in the absence of any information available, I am just now flagging it out for an entire global community. This is it's an free to air, open to all telecast. There is a surging pandemic in China. The focus has been on the Chinese cities. We have no idea what is happening in Lhasa, what is happening in Tibet or East Turkestan. The situation from the one or two anecdotal reports that have come out has suggested it's dire, it's bad, and I put to you the logic that these people will receive the worst of the medical care, the least of the medical supplies, the least of the food and nutrition which is required in an economic crisis, and the least of the empathy and sympathy of all the people and residents of China. Add to these, there actually might be some complicity in using the cover of the pandemic to explain away a lot of missing persons. There is an urgent, desperate emergency for us to seek from the Chinese greater clarity on what is going on in the situation in these occupied territories. So if you are able to provide it, anybody who's watching this broadcast anywhere in the world, please put it out, because we have to fear for the Buddhist Tibetans and the Muslim Uyghurs as we speak, as the worst affected in whatever chaos and death and pandemonium is currently underway in China for the reasons I have mentioned. I have tried for hours, my team has tried for hours, even from people that we know who have friends and family living in these areas, who are themselves in exile. They have almost no information, very little communication, and it's gotten worse over the past few days. And that's a bad sign. If you were in touch with somebody a week ago and suddenly you can't get in touch with them, something dodgy is going on, very worrisome. Gentlemen, in the vacuum of information we have to take on this conversation with me, I thank you. I've already overshot my time.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.